Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Masterflow Plumbing YouTube channel, where it is our goal and our mission to help teach you, the average homeowner, some basic plumbing repairs that you can accomplish around the home yourself. Before you do attempt to do any of this though, we would like to remind you that plumbing can be a dangerous activity and can cause personal injury and or property damage. So before you attempt to do any of this, please read our full disclaimer down here in the description box. While you're down there, please go ahead and click the subscribe button and the like button, as it does help us tremendously to keep bringing you this useful content. Today's video is going to be about how to solder copper pipe when there is water present inside of it. Our very first video that we did covered all the basics on how to solder copper piping, so if you haven't watched that one already, go back and watch that one first, as it covers all the little small details that you're going to need to know, all the basics on how to solder copper pipe together. This video is going to strictly talk about how to deal with copper pipe soldering when there is water present in the system. So to begin with, we're going to start off by putting our safety glasses on and our work gloves. So what happens to most people when they attempt to do soldering of a copper pipe in their home is that they turn the water off, as they should, then they cut into it and they drain the water out as much as they possibly can. However, there's always that little bit of water left behind. So what happens when you try to solder copper pipe when there's water inside there is that if there's enough water, you will never get the pipe hot enough to actually let the solder flow around and make a good seal. The other thing that can happen is if you do get it hot enough is that that water will begin to boil inside the pipe. And what happens when water boils? It turns to steam, and what does steam do? Steam builds pressure. So when you build pressure and you're trying to solder a copper pipe together, what it does is it blows the solder right back out as you're applying it. The way to identify that is it will actually shoot little tiny sparks, and you'll see the solder kind of splatter and bubble. If you see that and you're trying to solder a copper pipe together, you might as well just stop and try to figure out a way to get all that water out of that pipe, because you're going to have a leak almost guaranteed every single time if you see that happening. Now, before we begin, and I give you the couple tips here, I will tell you that over the years I have heard about the bread trick so many times. As a professional plumber, I will tell you that the bread trick is not a great idea to try. What happens? Well, let me explain first what the bread trick is. So the bread trick is you take a piece of bread and you make a little dough ball out of it basically, and you shove it inside the pipe and you stop the water from coming back out, so that you can go ahead and you can try to make a solder connection on that while the water's stopped. The idea being that the bread will eventually dissolve and then you don't have to worry about it and you're all fixed up by then. 99% of the time what happens though is that dough ball will travel somewhere where you don't want it to as soon as you turn the water back on inside your house. So we don't want that dough ball to wind up inside of a dishwasher solenoid valve or a washing machine solenoid valve. We don't want it to end up in the aerators on the end of your faucets or in your shower faucet, causing more severe problems. And then you have to have me come out and visit you in your home and spend a bunch of money. So with that said, I'm going to give you a couple of easy little tricks on how to deal with water. And it's not foolproof. It's not always going to work for you. It always will depend on your space that you have and the area that you're working in. But these are a couple things that I actually use quite often. So we're going to begin with, we're going to just take two pieces of pipe. And again, we are in the shop today, so we are not going to have any water in the pipe, so let's just pretend that there is for today's demonstration purposes. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the different ways of joining two pieces of pipe together. Now, again, this could be inside of a wall vertically like this. It could be horizontal. It could be like this. It could even be on a weird angle like that. However, most plumbers do not do that. It could be like this, or any configuration you can imagine. So let's just talk for a second and say that these two pieces of pipe needed to be joined together right here. You've gone ahead and you've turned the water off to your house first thing, you've cut into this pipe, and you've drained most of the water out of here. However, there's still a little bit in there that you can't get out. If your torch is good enough and hot enough, you'll be able to get the pipe hot enough to actually flow solder around there. But again, if you see solder splattering, bubbling, little tiny sparks flying out of the solder joint, you're going to have a leak. You have got to get that water out of that system, or you have to be able to relieve the pressure that builds up from the steam. So when there is water present in a pipe and you begin to heat it up, the water begins to boil inside there, and then that water turns to steam, and that steam turns to pressure, and that is what's causing that solder to bubble and blow sparks and do all that stuff that we don't want it to do. So the first thing I will tell you is that there are couplings and then there are drain couplings. Drain couplings are a wonderful thing for a plumber because it gives us a way to let that steam out so that we can go ahead and complete a solder joint. So what we do is we have two pieces of pipe and we're going to use this as a coupling. Okay, I am not prepping the pipe right now for this demonstration because we covered that in our first video. So we're going to pretend that this is all prepped and ready to solder, that it's all been cleaned up and fluxed and everything like that, but we want to let that water out. Well, this drain coupling has a cap that unscrews, and you want to be careful. There is a little rubber gasket inside that you don't want to lose. If you do, you can actually just take a little ball of Teflon tape and put it in there when you tighten it back on there, and that'll work just fine also. So having that cap off there allows the water to continue to drain out, or it allows the steam to escape, and you can begin to solder this pipe now by heating up the one side first until you can get the solder to flow all the way around, and then the other side, and then you're done. That is one method of doing it. Another method of doing it, and you probably are not going to have one of these in your home toolbox. This is actually a kit called a jet sweat kit, and any plumber worth the salt in his bread will have one of these on his truck because it will save you a lot of aggravation and a lot of time. Inside of this kit is a full set all the way up to 2-inch. I can do from 1/2 inch all the way up to 2-inch, with this particular kit. As you can see by mine, I rarely do 2-inch. Most of mine are 3/4 and 1/2 inch. So this is a 1/2 inch jet sweat tool, as it's called. And all it is a long rod. It's actually threaded all the way in there, and it will expand inside the pipe. When you tighten this down right here like this, it causes that rubber end to expand, and it stops the water flow. So basically, the way you would use this would be this. You would actually go ahead and you would actually insert this into the pipe if you can. Again, you might not be able to do this in the situation you're in, but if you can, this is the ideal way. You will get that inside that pipe about yay far or so. You want to make sure you leave enough there. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to tighten it and expand it. And it's going to stop that little bit of water from draining back at you. Okay? Now typically you'll hold back with a wrench right here or a pair of channel lock. Once you have inserted your jet sweat tool inside of the pipe and tightened it up and expanded that rubber plug on the end of it and have successfully stopped that little bit of water flow that was coming back at you right there, now you're ready to begin the next step. So this is the proper method. This is the real bread trick that plumbers use. They don't really use a loaf of bread like some of the old timers would tell you. So once you have your jet sweat tool in there and you have your copper prepped and ready to solder, again, ours is not because this is just a demonstration in the shop that we're showing you. Once you have your jet sweat tool in there and ready to go, you're going to straighten out this end right here, and you're going to have everything prepped, and you're going to take a ball valve. It has to be a ball valve. It cannot be a gate valve. It has to be a full port ball valve. If you can see right through that, that is a full port ball valve. When you turn it, you can see what happens. There's a ball that actually turns in there that shuts off the water and turns it on. So what we do after we have it all prepped is we take it and we slide it over the end of this. We slide it onto the pipe right there. Now we're going to go ahead at that point and we're going to make the solder connection right here. We're going to let it cool for a couple minutes. Very cautiously, we're going to begin to loosen our expansion plug on the end of this right here. And then we're going to pull this back out. Be very careful. There's going to be pressure built up from the steam and you could get burned. So if you've got the time, give it 10 or 15 minutes before you remove this. Let the water cool off completely so you don't get burned. So once you have that disconnect or pull it out of there, then at that point you can actually turn your ball valve off, and then you can do the other side, piece of cake with no water at that point. So those are two very basic ways on how to deal with water when you're trying to solder copper pipe together. Thanks for tuning in today. And just a reminder, we'd like you to actually read our disclaimer in our folder, in our description, and also click subscribe and like, as it does help us to keep bringing you this useful content. Thanks and have a great day.